Diving into the third and final tree of the Amazon, the currently top of the meta spear and javelin tree, that while it got some nerfs on the lightning side, it actually got boosts on the side we're looking at today. The physical skills, Jab, Impale, and Fend. And despite an odd tendency, it is important to remember that yes, these work with both javelins and spears, so don't be afraid to keep these on swap for lightning immunes on your Javazon. Starting with the one that didn't get any major changes, we have Jab, who really only got an indirect improvement in Resurrected, since now it will not get interrupted with things like dodge, evade, and avoid. Though this is likely because the skill itself, at least for its purpose, is fine, basically being a rapid-fire skill target damage dealer for whenever things are immune to your choice of other javelin skills. And while with some points it can be fun, though with escalating mana costs starting negative damage and only getting positive at level 6 or higher, and really the only redeeming qualities being speed and attack rating, it will never be an overwhelming choice in potency, but having a quick 3-stab attack on a single target can be handy in the right build as a backup. It's just going to need support from effects like Crushing Blow to really see it shine. As we move down the tree though, we see things that got some pretty drastic changes in Resurrected, with Impale becoming far more aggressive and worthwhile despite its slower attack speed. This is because in Resurrected the skill was given a mild speed up, but also made to function more like Smite with a guaranteed hit if the enemy is in range, making it a reasonable option for poking especially hard to hit enemies like Ubers. This, combined with the added slow effect and the fact that it cannot be interrupted, makes it pretty handy for dealing with a number of threats. For me, I tend to only use it in very limited circumstances though, since it still has a relatively slow attack and it does have the chance of durability penalties, though if you're using javelins, it's not something to really worry about because of how that works. But with the potential issue being if you're using a spear that is not indestructible, and even then you usually won't run into it very often unless you're trying to use this as your main attack. Which, speaking of a main attack, if you're using a physical Spearzon, it will almost always be either Jab, which we covered earlier, or the faster attacking but multi-target only, Fend. This skill actually functions more like a melee version of Strafe, except it lacks the minimum attack feature, which is somewhat disappointing. What this means is that against single targets, like say the Act bosses, you'll only do single attacks with it rather than rattling off a whole series like what you'd see with skills like Zeal or Jab. This means that this is a skill that benefits more from being even more surrounded, so it works exceptionally well on tank zons that like to sit in the middle of crowds and just fight enemies all over the place. And while a lot of people will use it with two-handed spears, its utility with javelins is often really underestimated, since you can become so durable with a max block shield and a one-handed poking stick that you are nearly indestructible. The big improvement for this in Resurrected, beyond no longer being interrupted by evasion skills much like Jab, is the increased attack speed they've given it by drastically reducing its post-action frames, meaning you attack much sooner after triggering your damage part of the attack. This has all made this skill that used to be hated in Lord of Destruction now become somewhat useful for a number of builds in Resurrected. Though all that said, do you like to run physical Javazons, or do you prefer to lean more into the meta builds that we'll be covering over the next couple videos? Mention it down below and check out the video on screen now if you prefer delivering your physical damage at a range.